All right. Thank you, Jen Sweeney, for being willing to talk with us and tell us a little bit about your perspective on the Matrix Guard. So the interview today we really have three goals. One is to learn more about you, Jen Sweeney, as a professional and a human. The second is to share just a little bit about what we're doing with the Matrix Guard. I know you already know a fair amount, but just share sort of a distilled down version of what we're doing. And then to really solicit your thoughts and wisdom as we grow the Matrix Guard going forward. So could you state your name and your professional identity?
Sure. My name is Jen Sweeney, and I'm a co-founder of X4 Health. We are a purpose-driven organization focused on making healthcare better for all stakeholders.
An amazing purpose-driven organization focusing on doing really, really good work. So, and I am particularly excited about and involved in the Third Conversation work where you're, can you say a little bit about Third Conversation?
Yeah, so Third Conversation is a really innovative program that one of my co-founders and then a primary care clinician and we all designed because we were really concerned that relationships had been engineered out of healthcare and that this field of healthcare in which healing should be at the center and the foundation of the system had really disintegrated. And what was happening, or what has been happening, is that patients and clinicians had been pitted against each other, and we thought it was really important to reinvent that relationship, to remind clinicians and patients that, in fact, we are allies. We share a lot of the same hopes and dreams when it comes to the healthcare system. So we have been bringing them together, clinicians and patients, to share their respective healthcare experiences. And what we're finding is that both of them, clinicians and patients, recognize that they have shared values, they connect as humans, they empathize with one another, and I think they begin to see that together they have collective power.
I love that. And you know, the thing about Their Conversation for me is it always sounds good on paper, but what's really cool is watching as you guys have advanced this, really watching the connections and the relationships and hearing some of the stories and seeing the pictures, and really it's a very genuine human connection. And as you know, human connection is, I think, a shared passion for both of us, and having empathy and having people really actually make the world better by putting their best selves out in the world. So, one of the things that the Matrix Guard is doing is creating an epic fellowship of unstoppable heroes. And by that, we really see heroic potential in every single person, and we look for the places where people are operating at their best. When we like to ask people about who their favorite hero was and sort of what they found heroic about different people. So when you were little, who was your hero and what inspired you most about them?
So I don't know that I had a typical hero when I was younger, but when I looked back and I sort of try to imagine who kept on coming up in my life as a child, but then also actually reappeared later in my life, is Louisa May Alcott, the author. I probably read Little Women, I'm going to say 25 times between the ages of probably 8 and 13. That's a lot. And then ultimately did a graduate thesis on her when I was in graduate school. And I think the reason I thought she was a hero was because she wrote these books that described family, domesticity, female power, and female relationships and connecting in such a beautiful way that it just made me feel incredibly safe. And it also reminded me of the house that I grew up in. It was very female focused. We were incredibly domestic. Well, my mother was. And there was a lot of safety associated with that. So, you know, as it turns out, later on in life, I found out that Louisa May Alcott had also written these very subversive feminist novels using a pen name. And I just thought, wow, how heroic was that at the time that she was growing up, you know, in Pennsylvania as a Quaker, to write these pretty dark pieces of literature while she was simultaneously writing these beautiful human-connected pieces of literature. I just thought, wow, that's incredibly brave. So I would definitely say she was one of my childhood heroes for sure.
I love that. I love all the reasons why she's one of your childhood heroes, and what you just encapsulated in terms of the darkness and light is what we believe about everybody. So, we each have a dark side and a light side, and there's no way to, we wouldn't want to get rid of that. It's part of the human experience, but that's such a beautiful depiction of what somebody could do with playing with their dark and their light side, writing these different books from completely different frames of reference, and being able to attend to and nurture both parts and accept both parts of themselves. So
I love that. I just have to say, so I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as humans is not accepting that we are not always good, and that all of us are fallible. And I think finding healthy ways to accept that, to be in grace with it, to love it. It may not be the best sides of us, but there could be a way to make it constructive. And instead, I think we use shame to make people feel incredibly horrible about some of their core inner beings. And that doesn't give that part of themselves any ability to evolve or be used constructively, because people are forced to hide that part of themselves. So I just love the fact that you're thinking about recognizing it and then addressing it in healthy, constructive ways. I think that's so, so needed.
Thank you. I think so too. And I think that's part of when you ask anybody to diminish or try to repress an entire part of their being, or to feel ashamed for feeling that way, instead of recognizing this is just part of the human experience. Everybody has it, and helping people understand what to do about it. It's very powerful. So I love that you see that. And at some point we may do some additional interviews, and I'd love to talk more about that with you, because I love your perspective. Each of us experiences challenge. Again, no way to get out of that if we're human. So can you think of a time when you have faced a difficult moment and you have figured out a way to get through that, and that it has somehow made you stronger?
Yeah, so I'm thinking specifically in terms of getting through a specific, challenging moment. I want to say it was about 5 years ago. I signed up for a leadership retreat, and it's going to be a whole 3 days in North Carolina mountains. And the goal was that I would do, multiple retreats and also do some work in between. And at the end of this, I would be a trained leadership coach. And I went to the retreat. Within 5 minutes, I completely panicked, because I realized, oh my goodness, I'm in the completely wrong place. This place is all about vulnerability. It's about somatic work. So we would be working with our bodies. And I had spent so many years up here in my brain. And I just thought, I can't do this. I can't be here for 3 days connecting with people as humans, because I had kind of rejected that part of myself in favor of the cerebral part, because I think a lot of times in our society, we're not encouraged to be connected. We're not encouraged to be empathic. We're rewarded for being in our heads and outside of our bodies. And thankfully, I powered through and managed to stay for the entire weekend. And it was mind-blowing for me, because I connected with my body for the first time in a very, very long time, which was really, really scary for me, actually. I connected with others at a really vulnerable level for the entire 3 days, also very scary for me. And it awakened inside of me something that had been kind of, I guess, beaten out of me to some degree by society and just by expectations. And I'm so grateful it did, because once that spark was relit and ignited again, I remembered how wonderful it was to be connected with humans at a really deep level. And that, it was rewarding to be vulnerable with someone else and hold space for them. And I don't think, I would have ever been able to open up a coaching business and be successful if I couldn't do that. So that helped me with that. But what it really quickly led me to is that I only wanted to work on efforts and initiatives and projects that would enable me to be truly authentic. I had been faking it for a long time in the work I was doing. And the second I realized how much better and how amazing it felt to be myself, I walked away from a lot of things that had been, I'd been doing just out of, responsibility or a sense of duty. And I'm so glad that I did.
That's like an incredibly huge heroic power. I mean, being able to be willing to be vulnerable and connect and not fake it and not give in to society. I mean, how long did you say this was? 3 days?
So that was the first retreat, and then I did it was a year long worth of work. And so the other backstory for you to know is that the gentleman who ran that was Doug Silsby, who Larry Dressler knows very well. Doug ultimately passed away a year ago this past April. Unfortunately, he literally got spine cancer and died within 6 months. It's horrible. But of course, Larry knew him. I mean, Doug was incredible. Larry's incredible. Like, being around Larry changes my life. Being with Doug changed my life. So I just think how fortunate I am that happened, and that I'm now in a place where I can do this work every single day.
And that the power of staying with it even when you're scared and creating something that is different than what you think you can do. That is like the biggest heroic challenge. My business partner, Catherine, let me see, her definition of authenticity is genuine self-expression, fearlessly made public.
Wow. Well, and the other thing that I think has, and this might be of interest for the Matrix Guard. I think that when we're given that opportunity to be truly authentic, and it's so scary, doing it either in community or with a mentor makes it so much better. So first I did it in community with Doug's group, but the second I started working with Christine, she would be very intentional about, well, Jen, you're an empath. Well, Jen, like, this is how you process things. And it made it for me, like, not a bad thing. It was a good thing. It was a gift. So if there's a way in the Matrix Guard sort of, universe where there are people who make it okay to be vulnerable, who support you along the way, who hold you up as, an example of the good things in the world, I think it makes it a little bit easier for us to walk through what seems like such a scary shift in our world.
And that is such a perfect segue really into what we're doing, because that's what we're doing. And we're using social media to do it, which is an interesting, but that's where everybody is now, right? So that's we think about our business model as the Matrix Guard. It's really, we're unique in the sense that we are changing the way that those connections are made and offered. So right now, our system for mental wellness is really, A, you have to know you need some support. B, you have to be willing to get support. C, you have to believe that there's something out there that can help you. And then you have to go it alone. You have to trudge through the system to see if you can find people and resources and figure out how to navigate through that. And depending on whether it's an urgent situation or a longer term thing, there can be many, many, many barriers to that. So switching that around, going to people, helping offer a connection when they're in a moment of need, and agreeing to stay with them on that journey for a short time or a much longer time, depending on what they need, and finding other people to come on the journey with them, and doing it in community, figuring out ways to do this. So this is a social media platform, which some people question, is that really community? But it is community, and that's where people are gathering. So that's really our mission, is to figure out exactly how to do that, and how to meet them where they are, how to stay with them for as long as they want, how to make it easy for them to get the support they need. And I think that you're bringing up a point that we intend to do, but we don't specifically say, which is really make it okay to be vulnerable by bringing people together in a community where there are other people with you doing the same thing and supporting you in that. So I think we should add that to our core, what we're doing. And thank you for sharing that. We recognize that every single person has a deep desire. We are wired for connection, and we are wired to want to be mentally well. we want to feel good in our skin and our body and our lives. We want to wake up and go to sleep every day feeling like we matter and that people see us and that they recognize us for who we are. And yet there's not a single one of us that escapes the fact that sometimes we just don't feel like that. And sometimes it's hard to get out of that. I wonder if you have any experience with yourself or someone close to you who has had an experience like that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, so it's funny actually, because I don't think that was in any of your questions, but now I'm thinking of something that might be helpful. So Rowan, my son, who is now 18, when he was a freshman in high school, he got a concussion. And this was like the fourth injury he got as part of travel soccer. This was over a course of many, many years. Up until that point, his entire life was about soccer. I mean, he played soccer constantly. My husband and I watched soccer with him constantly. We've traveled to soccer games around the country. I mean, this kid was, and he was also really good at soccer. Not like we thought he was going to be a professional, but he just was really good, and he loved the game. And freshman year, he gets this concussion. And looking back, I actually think he was depressed. I think he became depressed because he was a freshman, which freshman in high school, I think, is very isolating to begin with. You're in this big school for the first time, and it's a huge adjustment. But he lost the one thing he truly cared about, which is soccer. It was an outlet from like a physical and a mental perspective, but it was also like where his friends were. It was where he had spent all of his time. You know, I think teenage boys need to be busy, and he went from being really, really busy to not busy at all. And he, you know, I think he felt really isolated. He felt really alone. And as a parent, it was excruciating to watch because I couldn't fix that immediately. There was nothing that I could do. What ended up happening, and he actually wrote his college essay about this, was someone said to him, would you be interested in trying out for a play? And he had been involved in chorus, you know, all throughout elementary and middle school, and was in the chorus in high school. He got this part in the play, and it completely changed his life. Being a part of a community, practicing on a regular basis, having people to share jokes with, being accountable to them, because when you're on stage, like if you mess up, it doesn't look good for anybody. Same as if you're on a field. If you mess up, like it affects the whole team. And those kids ended up being his closest friends throughout all of high school. They all just came back for Thanksgiving, and those were the kids that he spent all of his time with. It also was great because these were just really sweet kids. I think they recognized that like not everybody's into musicals, so they really supported each other because they knew that the outside community wasn't as supportive as they could have been to them. They were kind of seen as a little bit dorky, I think. So I think he made it through that time with community, with accountability, and honestly fun and joy. They had so much fun. Like you would see these kids and they would just be laughing at all of the rehearsals and all of the run up to the shows, and, you know, in my basement on the weekends watching movies. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so happy that Rowan somebody invited him to do something, and that he was brave enough to try something that he hadn't done and to do something different. It would have been, you know, those two things, soccer and theater, probably have a lot in common, but on the surface, especially from a teenager's perspective, they have a lot of differences in between those. So I love that story. I'm going to ask you to look through two lenses. One is your lens as a professional, and then your second is a lens as a human. And in both cases, share your reactions or thoughts about what we're doing, our mission, and any suggestions you have for what to consider as we're growing forward.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question because I think it's like meta. What's so fascinating to me about the Matrix Guard is, one, you know, technology has been phenomenal. It has allowed us to do things that we never could do before. Like I'm literally talking to you on a computer, essentially, that I carry around with me all day long. I'm wearing a computer on my wrist, like an Apple. I mean, it's just amazing when you think about it. And at the same time, I think we as as like a society have become increasingly, especially I think in the developed world, more and more isolated. I mean, if I wanted to, I could not leave my house for weeks. I could have food delivered, I could have movies, shown on my screen, and just never interact with a human being, which I think really goes against, as you said before, our natural humanity, which is to be in community and to be connected. So I think on one hand, we've got this, great tool technology. And on the other hand, we've got these really isolated people just, growing every day. And then I think the other part that is so fascinating is the internet can bring people together, and it does. I actually fully believe that the internet is a place for community. In fact, 18 years ago, when my first child was born, I joined a group on the internet of mothers who were having children in September 2001. And I stayed with that group for 16 years. Wow. We were all over the country, different ages, different races, religions. I mean, it's the most diverse group you can imagine. We celebrated all our children's birthdays together. We met in person, some of us. I mean, that was a community that kept me going when my kids were little. And many of them have never met in person. So I do think that the internet can be a place for community to create that connection. I also think it can be really dangerous. Mm-hmm. I definitely have had fears for my kids that, when they're looking at something like Instagram, it's hard not to create comparisons, and they become like, feeling like inferior, or they concern themselves around things like materialism, or all just the insecurities that teenagers experience. But then even if they were able to get through that, I think sometimes the internet is used as a tool to hurt people. Mm-hmm. People say mean things to each other because there's just a computer screen there. They don't actually see, the human being that is on the other side of it, like the flesh and blood. So I love the idea of the matrix guard because I think, one, it does meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. People are online. Some of them are online all day long. Mm-hmm. So if they're isolated, if they're depressed, if they're hurting, if they feel disconnected, they're unlikely to seek help outside in the world. They're spending all of their time on the computer. So what better way to meet them and to help them and to give them that connection and to let them be vulnerable and to provide them with that community? I love that. And then on the other hand, I also think the Matrix Guard can be a model for how to engage online in positive ways. There are lots of examples of how people are bullied, playing games or being on message boards or being on Instagram. I mean, even people in Hollywood are bullying each other on Instagram. The Matrix Guard could be a place where the rest of the world that's online is looking to you and saying, oh, wait a minute, we can be a tool for good. We can connect people and hold them up and love them over, the internet waves. What an incredible thing. So clearly, I'm a huge fan of the mission, and I think it's needed. I think the Matrix Guard is filling a dangerous void, and I have lots of optimism that this can be a tool for good.
Great, thank you. I absolutely, I so agree with you. Obviously, that's why we're doing this, but just the way that you articulate that and the sincerity with which you bring that, both as I'm afraid for my kids. I also work in an environment where I'm dependent on this technology and I use it for good. And the idea of modeling, being, and maybe even intentionally modeling, it seems like a really great advancement and a good thing for us to think about building in from the very beginning of time, so that we're not just doing it and hoping people will figure it out that we're doing it, but that we actually can be intentional about modeling it and promoting the fact that we're modeling it.
Yeah, I mean, you could crack the code on using the internet for good. I think that's, that I don't know that has been done, because we've been so quick to sort of adopt the behavior and use the tool. We haven't really thought about the long-term implications of what we're doing.
All right. Anything else from your perspective as, you've shared a lot about your, as a mom, as a, parent in a community of other parents. That's super cool. I wish I had known that there were these groups. I would have loved to have joined a group like that. So a little late now, but for that.
It's actually not. So here's the other interesting thing. Around the same time, like 2 years after I had Rowan, there was a listserv in DC called DC Urban Moms. It was started by a man and a wife, and a husband and wife. They had a young child, and at the time in Northwest DC where we were living, there were not a lot of parents. There were not a lot of young people having children, and it felt incredibly isolating. So they created this listserv, which of course, as soon as I found out about it, I joined because I'm a connector, and it has now been, in existence for 18 years. People are on it way beyond just the DC area. It has grown exponentially. They've actually created boards now in New York and Chicago, but people just come on board and talk. And they've actually had to create multiple boards, like the travel board, the over 50 board. I mean, to me, it's a fascinating petri dish of the fact that people do want to talk to each other virtually. I mean, some of these people will never, ever see each other or even know who each other is, because for the most part, it's anonymous. When I first joined the listserv, it was not. And I ended up meeting some of the parents on that. But I think the more you dig into the internet, like with Reddit and things like that, I mean, it's so clear that people want to be in connection. So I started watching that show, The Man in the High Castle. And I was watching it last night. It's on Amazon. And I watch it like when I'm on my treadmill. And last night, I Googled a question that I had about the show because I couldn't understand to me. There's an entire section of the internet dedicated to this question of people in conversation about it. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it really, really is. And I think that the tendency right now is to separate the good and the bad. And I did that. That's part of the reason why this is such gaming is bad. Things that involve you being on the internet constantly all the time. I mean, I was continuously telling my kids to go outside and meet people and connect with people, and really realizing now the detriment to doing that, to not understanding better the world that they live in and embracing it more and seeing it. And I feel very fortunate that I got an education in this watching Bennett stream on Twitch, and really saw for myself exactly what you're describing. That people want to connect. They want to have this connection, and that they can connect and find meaningful connection on the internet too. So,
if there was a way for you all to have prominently, in your literature, on your website, in your messaging, that you're working with a cadre of young people, like advisors, because for two reasons. One, I think that will just lend cred to the work that you're doing. But that book on peer pressure was so fascinating to me, the Tina Rosenberg book, because what blew me away in that book was you had on one hand the tobacco industry that dominated the teenage market. They completely understood how to hook these teens and the messages that they needed. Then on the other hand, you had all these public health professionals who are just steeped in knowledge and expertise around public health, and every single one of their messages flopped. And it was because they truly did not understand teenage brains or what appealed to them. And it just made me think, if you had a cadre of teens you could turn to, or young people who are on Switch on a regular basis, like I think a group of advisors, it would just be really great to have that to tap into, to help you with the messaging. Because I think I just look at all the hundreds of millions of dollars or millions of dollars the public health community spent thinking they knew what it was teenagers cared about. And they were totally wrong. So if you are able to sort of tap into their brains and understand what appeals to them and how to build that community and how to give that, so for example, my kids, despite the fact that I have been so open with them their entire lives about mental health issues, my daughter actually has a very negative perception of getting mental health help. And I think it has to be because she's been somehow messaged externally by the people who she cares about the most right now as a teenager, her fellow peers.
Yeah.
I don't know what those messages are, so I can't combat them, but I would think you guys will be in a similar situation where you'll need to understand what those peeps are telling each other so that you can still be appealing to the crowd you want to meet.
Yes. And we do have advisors, but we haven't formulated them in any particular way. So that's another great suggestion. And I think something that we would benefit from doing it again, much like we're going to model positive interactions on the internet very intentionally. We're going to use and organize the input from the people that we're trying to reach in a very intentional way versus sort of more of a one-off way. So, yeah.
Yeah, because the whole human-centered design thing, I mean, this, creating this in a way that they love will make you more powerful and able to help more people, I think.
Okay. At the beginning of the interview yesterday, before in advance of the interview, I gave you a list of fun questions that you could pick to answer. And so we'd learn just a little more in conclusion about something that we definitely wouldn't know about you otherwise. Did you pick one?
I did. And it's like the perennial question, if you could get the answer to one question, what would that question be? And it's, what happens after you leave the human body? I'm like lately just obsessed with that question, the human physical body.
Yes. Well, if you get the answer, will you let me know?
I keep on having these like weird out of body experiences where I feel like we're all on the Truman Show. And I don't know why it's coming to me over and over and over again. And I don't know why I keep having that sensation, but it just makes me go, oh, well, am I having it because we are on the Truman Show? So yeah, if I find out, I'll let you know. Okay,
I'll let you know too. I'm having some equally crazy experiences that are just really, things are shifting.
Mm-hmm.
So, to the extent that we can make that for the good, that would be wonderful.
I think the only other thing that I would say is I still have really very little idea what Twitch is. My son was looking at it this weekend. I'm like, what? I don't even know what that is. I had no idea that there was like cooking and all of those things that was in your recent email. I thought that was, and the video that you showed us, I thought it was really important to make it clear that Twitch is not just for gamers. There's a lot of other communities on there because I think a lot of people have a similar kind of mindset that you had earlier about, gaming being bad. And maybe you don't need to do that because to appeal to your crowd, they're already going to be there. So but I think for funders and stuff, like I just don't even know if they know what this stuff is or how many people are on it and the reach you could have and the ways in which you could make a difference. That would be the only thing because I didn't know a lot of this until I looked at the video and at your website and the fact sheet. I just had no idea.
So Twitch's new branding campaign that they outlined that they unveiled in September at TwitchCon, where they sold out the whole city of San Diego and packed the convention center with more people than I even remember exist on the planet in any one place. I mean, it's so incredible what a force it is and how many people are attracted by that. But they unveiled the branding campaign where their tagline is, "You're already one of us." And
wow,
it's a brilliant, brilliant campaign. You'll start seeing, I got a text message from Matt Lewis, who there was a huge billboard in Dallas that said, "You're already one of us," and had the Twitch billboard. My brother sent me one from New York City. So there's up, and I think we will begin to see that there's a lot more public awareness of Twitch and what it is, not to mention the fact that Bernie Sanders and Trump they both have Twitch channels, just in case you're not getting enough of them.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yes. So I believe that there will be a very different world. And, in the next 10 years, we won't say, "Did you watch the game?" You'll say, "Whose channel did you watch the game on?" Because you'll be able to pick the broadcaster. You'll be able to pick the commentary that you want to hear during the debate. You'll be able to pick it transforms everything. So my enchantment with Twitch, and I think the potential and power of it is really, it is really been one of the major igniters of what we're doing, is seeing what they're already doing. And I love their construct that you're already one of us. If you're cooking, if you want to watch, they play old Mr. Rogers videos, and they have, you know, shows, and they have people interacting. They show Julia Child's cooking shows. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. These people aren't even alive anymore, and they're live streaming.
Do you remember the guy who used to paint? He had really bushy hair.
Yeah.
Bob Ross. So he is having a huge revival right now. I think he might be on Twitch as well.
Oh yeah, that's part of how his revival came about, because they started live streaming him on Twitch, and you can watch his painting show, and then people in the chat will say, it's a tree, you know, and they'll say, you know, it's fascinating. I actually have watched that show, and it's really, it is fascinating. It's changing the world, the way that we do everything that we do. And there's Emmett Shear, who is the CEO of Twitch, who I think is just a fascinating strategic leader, and he has a really interesting brain. He did a TED Talk about Twitch that's really worth watching. I'll send you the link to it.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you so much I just love being able to connect with you, but thank you for asking for my opinions and my thoughts. As I said, I really just love this work, and I think it's desperately needed. So, you know, please don't feel like this is the only interview or time to chat with me. I can always make time for you.
I promise I will take you up on that many times over. So thank you so much.
Sounds good.
I adore and love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Same. Take care. Bye.